My grades are green today. Thank you. They are green. They are.
Hey y'all, today's episode is titled Separated Hearts, Parental Separation, and Mental Health. This is part 1 of 3, discussing my story being separated from my children. So let's get into it.
Welcome, journeyers, to Journey to Freedom, where it's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. My name is Janicia. I am your host. Today we're going to be discussing parental separation and what that does on your mental health. Rather, what that's done on my mental health. I found myself in a mental crisis. This was one of them. Let's get into it. My story. This is my story. Y'all, I have been waiting for this day to discuss my story, to discuss what happened, to discuss this with you all, to discuss this period. So this is the moment that I get to share exactly that, what happened. So in 2020, I won't forget, in August 2020, I heard her calling to move back to Virginia, to discover my purpose. And I thought that my children were going to come with me. However, that was not the case. My children wound up staying in Florida with their father. At the time, my husband, the marriage was not in a great place, and we did try to work on it. It didn't work, but in that, moving to Virginia was the best option for me at the time. I could not let the fact that my children wasn't coming with me stop me from discovering my purpose, because I knew that that was why I was called out of Florida into Virginia. So in the beginning, first moving from Florida was like, at first it was difficult. Leaving my children, oh my goodness, that was like the worst. I could not imagine it being any worse than what it actually was. Actually, it could have been a lot worse. I'm not gonna say that, but it was hard seeing their faces, being sad, crying, not understanding, knowing that it was nothing they was going to be able to do to stop me from going. It was not easy leaving. I literally left with everything that I could put into my SUV. It didn't fit everything, so I had to give a lot of things. It was a lot of things that was given away. It was a lot of things that was sold off. When I moved from my apartment, when I had to take everything out, that was a whole nother experience for me and my children and my husband at the time. It was an emotional roller coaster, I must say. Going through that experience was very emotionally draining. Okay. But I knew that I needed to do it, so I had to do what I had to do. And in the process, I was believing God the whole way. I mean, I literally every morning coming up to August 31st, because that is the day I left, coming up to that day, it was a lot of praying. It was a lot of like early morning rising, talking to God, getting some instruction, figuring out what I was going to do for that day. I mean, I had to pack up a whole apartment. I had a lot of stuff and I sold it all because I knew God was going to give it back to me. I had full trust in God at that time. Full faith in God that He was going to turn the situation around, that He was going to make it be. And honestly, to the end, to the last day, August 31st, the morning I was about to leave, I believed that my husband at the time was going to change his mind and either come with us or allow me to take the children with me. I believed it to the last day. And when that day came and he wasn't going and they weren't coming, it just really, it was emotional for me. But I had to try to keep it together because I didn't want my kids, they was already crying, and he cried, and just we all cried because it was just sad, to experience watching your mom leave, you know what I'm saying? And watching my children feel sad about me leaving and me not having any idea what was going to be next. But when I did leave on the road driving, I don't know, I think I was a little indifferent. I had to try to keep it together, because what else am I supposed to do? Some tears definitely trickled, but it wasn't until I got to North Carolina, I met my mom and my sister and a couple of my nieces and nephew. I met them in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach. That day was a tough day. That was probably the toughest point at that point. I cried that night, cried and cried. I couldn't believe I left. It was like the wool was pulled from under me, the rug was pulled from under me, and I was really dealing with the reality that I just left my children. And it was a tough moment. I cried so much. And it didn't end there. Like, I got to my mom's house. I didn't have my own place to stay, so I was staying with my mother. At the time, she was living in an apartment with her husband, and so they did have an extra room, but they were using that room. So, like, I'm just in this room, coming from a 2-bedroom apartment that I had that was in my name, that was mine, going to my mom's, back to my mom's house without my children, without my husband at the time, being by myself, and just sitting in that room and crying. Every day, every night. I went to sleep in tears. I woke up in tears. For a while, that's how I lived, and I was still believing God that, but I lost all track, y'all. I lost all track of what I was supposed to be doing out here. Emotionally, things got really tough. I was going through the emotional portion of being separated from my children, but my husband wanted to get a divorce. So I went through that. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like, okay, wait. I wasn't talking to my kids as much. I wasn't able to see my kids. That, it really got very tough. It got very tough for a long time. For about 1.5 years was the toughest. That was the toughest point of leaving. That was the toughest point because I wasn't able to see my kids. I was concerned about going down and visiting them. I could find no peace, really. I really had a hard time. I was like, God, what is this? What is this? I know you called me out here. I know it for a fact because I could not leave on my own. I couldn't leave my kids like that on my own. I had to be empowered by the Lord to be able to do that because I know I was called out. What is this now? Come again? Come again? Why am I going through this? So I lost my way. I lost my relationship with God got really shaky at that time because I couldn't find understanding at that moment. I was going through a lot of things emotionally. Still trying to pray and keep my faith, and but at the same time, it was difficult for me to see what was really going on. Like I said, it was hard for me to understand. And things got tough. Things got tough before they got better. But emotionally, because I felt like I couldn't really deal with the emotion of it all, I fell into a lot of other things. Drinking, partying, smoking weed. Like, listen, this is really, I want to be as open as possible about all of it. You know, there is nothing that can hold me because God loves me. You know, he loves him to me, and I still belong to him, and I'm still called, you know, according to his purpose. You know, not mine. According to his purpose for my life, I'm still called. No matter what I've been through, he knew what I was going to go through prior to calling me, and he still called me. Period. You know, so I'm being really honest with you guys. Like, I don't want to hold back anything, you know, and as the Lord wills, as he opens my mouth, I shall speak. So yes, I went through a lot of different motions to try to protect myself in the feelings that I could not grapple with. I could not understand what was going on. I could not see my way out. I was really stuck in the emotion of me being away from my children. It was really hard. Very hard, very difficult, to say the least. And but I'm here today. All of that happened then. It was, like I said, it was about up until 2022. Up until 2022, I remember I left August 31st, 2020. I got to Virginia September 1st, 2020, and I went to see my children again for my son's 8th birthday in September. And that was the last time I seen my kids until March of 22. Until March of 22. And when I say that I am a mother, I am a mother. When I was with my kids, I mothered them. Okay? We went places together. I taught them school. I was in all the meetings. You know, a very involved parent I was a very involved parent, and I had predominant of control. I controlled their environment predominantly while I was there. After a while, their dad started getting more and more involved into their day-to-day, but for the most part, it was me for a long time while I was down there. And even before I got down there, you know, when we were living in other places, I was pretty much in control of, like I said, their environment, their day-to-day. So to go from that to have no control or no say at all, it felt like my rights were stripped. I gotta be honest. It felt like my rights were stripped from me. Like I had no say at all in what they were going to be doing. And because I really didn't. I mean, let's be honest. I really didn't have any say at all. Because like I said, from September 2020 to March of 22, that was the next time I saw my kids in person. And it's not like I was getting a whole lot of FaceTime during that time either. You know, so it was like a very hard experience. That time frame was very difficult for me to deal with. Not to mention, I was a control freak. I had to control everything, and a part of my a part of the illness that I struggled with mentally was that's how I felt like I could gain control back. You know, I lost control of a lot of things, but for me to control an environment was like I could gain some kind of consistency there, you know. And so for me to lose all of that in a blink of an eye it was hard. It was hard for me to deal with. And so, and not just being away from them and losing control, but also going through a divorce. My children being raised by another woman, having another woman in their home over them. In a blink of an eye, other children being involved. I was going through a lot emotionally as a mother, like forget all of the other titles that I was holding before I came, but just the title of being a mother. That separation from my children really was a mental breaking point for me. I broke mentally. It was a crisis I was in. And I tried to medicate myself in any way possible so I can feel as less of it as possible. And although I wasn't able to talk to my kids as much as as I probably should have for reasons outside of me, you know what I'm saying? I probably had something to do with that too, because how do I talk to my kids every day like this, feeling like this, with all of these emotions and all of this anger and frustration that I'm dealing with? How do I talk to my kids every day? How do I look at them? You know what I'm saying? And then hear their hurt because they're crying. You don't know how many times I talk to my children on the phone and they're crying. Like, we miss you, Mom. Like, come back. Like, where are you? Why aren't you here? You know what I'm saying? Like, talking to my oldest son, who I'm not going to say felt it the most during that time, but because he was older, he had more of an understanding of what was going on, and but less at the same time, because though he understood the reality of the situation, he didn't understand why that was happening. You know what I'm saying? And I tried to explain it to them the best way I could, but I didn't really understand why there had to be a separation at the time. But glory be to God that it's 2024 and I am so much further. Y'all don't know. I am so much further than I was. I mean, I was living in hotels. I was living with my mom. I lived with a friend for a time. There was a few months that I lived like that, just from pillar to post in a sense. I mean, not that I didn't have a place to lay my head. Thank God that I did. And being a veteran, y'all, if you are suffering from homelessness as a veteran, there are resources for you. Do not feel like you have to be alone. Do not feel like you have to sleep up under a bridge, because you do not. I thank God that was never my story, to have to sleep in a place outside of a shelter. But if you are a veteran, there are options. There are options, and there are options outside of homeless shelters. There's a big stigma around homeless shelters too. You don't want to be stolen. You don't want people to thieve from you, and you know what I'm saying. There's a lot of things about homeless shelters that people would rather be on the street. But you don't need. There are resources for you as a veteran. Do not feel like you are alone, because you are not. But I've used those resources. I've had access to those resources on more than one occasion to help me stabilize my life, for me and for my children. Glory be to God. And I stand here today as a homeowner. Like, God will change a situation. We have to understand that and believe it. Getting off my soapbox. But it is possible. And I did all of, from that point to this point, was all with veteran assistance, all with veteran resources. So as a veteran, the resources are out there. I mean, I can't say anything but that the resources are out there. Access them. So that's my story in a nutshell. I went through a lot of things emotionally to cope with it before I was doing it healthy, I was doing it in an unhealthy way. Like I said, I was trying to medicate myself with drugs and alcohol. And drugs, marijuana, yes, it is a drug, but it's also legal. So, but I don't want to have to result to things that I feel like is harming me. You know what I'm saying? And that's not to say, that just that, but the way that I was using it was what I had more of a concern with. It was a daily thing that I had to do, and not just daily, but all throughout the day, just to keep myself above water, to keep myself from feeling like I was drowning, and that's not something I should have to result to that extent, because I'm a child of God, but mentally I wasn't taking care of myself mentally. I wasn't taking care of my mental state. I wasn't taking care of my emotional state, because I couldn't get my feet up long enough, you know what I'm saying? But after a while I did start seeking help, and I started to see more clear, and so I want to discuss the understanding of parental separation in mental health.
Thank y'all for tuning in to today's discussion. Be sure to come back next Friday for part 2, where we get into understanding parental separation and the effects on mental health in relation to my story. Don't forget to join the community. I have a Facebook group called Journey to Freedom. I also have a Facebook page for this podcast, Journey to Freedom. Subscribe. My link tree is going to be in the show notes, as well as I'm sure will be in the comments for the Facebook page. Subscribe to my podcast and subscribe to my email list so that you can be up to date and current in all the newest events that are going to go on. I plan to do prizes and raffles. So become a journeyer if you haven't already. Also, if you have a mental health story that you would like to share, if you've experienced a mental crisis, if you are going through one right now and you need some support, or you have gone through and you want to provide support, come on my show. I'd love to have you as a guest, as well as join the community so that you can provide the support that other people may need, and so that you can receive the support that you may need. Okay, so join the group, join the conversation, because mental health